religions, which, you know, the Catholic faith does teach you to be civil to one another, and also we learn about other religions in our, like, part of our syllabus, which I think is very, very important, and it gives us a basis to know, which I don't think you would get if you went to a comprehensive school. I go to many other places and I meet other people. I've met many Jews, many Muslims, many different people, and I've been able to get on with them due to part of, like, the teaching that I get at Catholic school, and also I just get on with them. They're still people at the end of the day, despite their faith, and I think that's very, very important.
I want to bring in Jay Lakhani. You've been listening to this debate. You're director of the Hindu Academy.
Indeed, yes.
What's your take?
See, first of all, we hear the language tolerate people of other religion. We also hear the word now being bandied about saying learning to respect people of other religion. This is a red herring, because in reality what they mean is this: we are right and they are wrong, but we won't make a fuss about it at the moment. They'll find out soon enough when they die. So this is really a very, at the moment, the way the faith schools are kind of run is the way they're presenting faiths themselves are very exclusivist, very kind of divisive, and I would say something that should not be funded with public money.
We must pause it there with a thank you to Dr. Mohammed Makadam for joining us there, and to say that for the moment is so much for faith schools. What about the rest of the state system? Is it time to change the law and make these schools truly secular? That's after the break. Welcome back. While faith schools dominate the debate about religion in schools, they are only part of the story. Faith is alive and well in the rest of the state system in the form of compulsory religious education and a daily act of collective worship of a broadly Christian nature. With faith schools serving the needs of children of the devout, are these legacies of the 1944 Act an anachronism that's overdue for reform? Our next witness is Andrew Copson. Andrew Copson is the Director of Education at the British Humanist Association, and he leads their campaign on religion in schools. No parent is required to send their child to participate in an act of collective worship at a state school, so what's the problem?
Well, there are two problems. First of all, you say no parent is compelled to do so, but of course it is the parent's choice and not the child. There are plenty of children who are compelled to engage in religious worship, though they may not wish to do so. And the second problem is that really we don't believe that any parent should have to make the choice. Many parents, certainly the parents who come to us for advice, don't want their child to seem different, maybe feel marginalised and alienated in that way.
Let me, on that, bring in Bishop Peter. You've got your faith schools. Mm-hmm. Why should everyone else be compelled to endure, if they don't want to, an act of collective worship? You seem to want your cake and eat it.
Well, I think it's, I mean, it is still a part of the Act, and in the review of the Act, it wasn't removed. I continue to believe...
The question is, given that that is the case, why should it be the case? Because you obviously support it.
Well, I support it to this degree, that I think there is merit in people gathering together. There is merit in people experiencing worship, that is, both of each other and of wider values that may be part of a tradition. And in this country, it is a Christian tradition.
But forgive me, an act of worship is, you could come up with all sorts of definitions, but it's effectively an act of devotion or reverence to a supernatural deity. In the case of our schools, a Christian deity. It's not getting together and saying how much you want to understand each other.
No, that's right. And, I mean, of course, I've sat in many school assemblies. I've led many school assemblies. I fully accept that this is a very difficult issue, but I at the same time think that there is some merit in actually giving people space for reflection, even if at the end of the day they're not able to agree with or make the worship in the way that I might make it.
That's very interesting. You're not making a very powerful case by your own account for having an act of worship. You're making a good case for saying you should get together and reflect and participate in a communal event.
Yes.
Which is very different from what the law requires.
Well, the law requires a broadly Christian perspective.
You're almost saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you wouldn't object, actually, if a school said, well, actually, we want to have a humanist act of collective, whatever it would be, reflection.
Well, as you know, I take the view that we belong to a Christian culture. I think we should never apologise for that. And therefore, in a sense,
Muslim doesn't belong to a Christian culture. Hindu doesn't belong to a Christian culture.
But the
Jew doesn't belong to a Christian culture.
reality of this nation is a Christian culture. We may have all sorts of different groups of people within that culture, and right the way through from the Elizabethan settlement, the responsibility of the monarch, therefore for the church, has been to protect the well-being of the minority bodies within the country. It has always been that there have been minority groups within the nation, and our perspective is quite distinctly, very clearly Christian.
But we're dodging the fact that we do have a state religion in England. It's unique, isn't it? It's unique. And the fact of the matter is, you're quite right, a lot of schools, the evidence given to our committee by the Chief Inspector of Schools this morning, many schools don't even carry out an act of worship at all.
Yeah, and it could easily... They define the law, technically.
Of course, they define law. It could easily be replaced by a non-religious humanist experience having certain values in common.
Let me bring in Dr. Indrajit Singh, not least from the Sikh Messenger. What is your perspective on this?
Well, first of all, can I just broaden it a little bit? Because everything we've heard this evening applies only to the Abrahamic religions. And we are being sort of pushed into that, where we are not there at all. I agree with many of the points Professor Dawkins makes. I agree with many of the criticism. But when you talk about faith, the Abrahamic faiths all have this in common. They are exclusivist. They all feel that they have a special relationship with God. With Sikhs, it is totally different.
In that context, what would you do about in this country, about the collective act of worship? Because it's clear, if Parliament wished to change the law, Parliament could change the law.
It has, in fact, become virtually meaningless with people of different religions within the school, and it ought to be replaced by a common reflection on ethical issues.
Let me bring in Catherine Weddell. Catherine Weddell, who's here. What's your thought?
My feeling is that there should be collective reflection at school, that collective worship has no place in state secular schools. I agree with Professor Dawkins that indoctrination into a faith and the assumption that students are going to be of a certain faith is inappropriate. However, I agree wholeheartedly with our last speaker, who said that I feel that an active collective reflection should have a more central place in schools.
It sounds to me, from what I'm hearing so far, that we're doing a very British thing of having this thing we call a collective act of worship. No one takes it terribly seriously in its formal terms, but it's quite a good way of a school getting together. Luis Nayusi, what's your view in the back row?
I think there should be an act of collective worship, because this is one of the ways through which we can have integration and also teach other children of other faiths about our own faith.